Metroid Dread brought the 5-part core saga of the Metroid series to an end, but that end may now be a new beginning. I don't believe either dev team Mercury Steam or genius producer Yoshio Sakamoto are done with this phenomenal franchise, but I do think the options are wide open to them, wider perhaps than ever before. In this video, we'll look at the possibilities for the next Mercury Steam Metroid. First, let's discuss, are they definitely doing one? I'm not going to dwell on this. Yes, I absolutely believe that they will keep this successful partnership going. It's true that there were disappointing stories about poor working conditions at Mercury Steam, but Nintendo has, in the past, and I'm sure once again can, use their weight to ensure that these mistakes are not repeated. It's not so much that I have huge faith in a corporate monolith to do the right thing, but rather that Nintendo hates bad publicity and does seem to be a lot more concerned with the health and well-being of its game development staff, especially in recent years. Reports out of Retro in the noughties whether they made steps to fix whatever issues caused a massive crunch on the original Metroid Prime. Next Level Games has sustained a good reputation for looking after staff, and Nintendo's dedication to keeping release dates under wraps until very late on is a great move for developer well-being, shielding devs from the pressure of arbitrary external deadline. It's possible, of course, that Mercury Steam go their separate way and develop a different series. They have a track record with Castlevania, and Metroid Dread gave them a huge platform, making them attractive partners for many a games publisher. But Metroid really is a dream project, and Nintendo likes to cultivate long-term partnerships. Will Mercury Steam develop another Nintendo title? I'm putting that at 90%. Very high likelihood. And if they're developing anything, almost certainly it's Metroid. So let's discuss format. Another 2D platformer in the style of Dread would be the most obvious direction, and I suspect would receive the most popular reception from core fans, especially if it takes the moniker of Metroid 6. However, Sakamoto did try his hand at a 3D third-person Metroid game of his own in Other M, and despite Other M's lackluster reception, I wonder if he may feel that itch again. I'm not sure how much of the failure of Other M is truly to be laid at the feet of the gameplay mechanics. I will admit, I've never played Other M. It was smack bang in a phase of my life where I was playing very few video games, but most of the criticism levelled at it comes in the form of its narrative weaknesses. It's true also that Team Ninja, while talented developers, may not quite have nailed the Metroid feel in the same way that Mercury Steam seemed to have done. But with Metroid Steam having proved themselves so comprehensively on now 2 consecutive Metroids, and with Yoshio Sakamoto having had well over a decade to take in and thoroughly digest the lessons of Other M's failure, I'm not sure a 3D version is out of the question if the developers felt there was unfinished business after 2010, and that Other M should not be the final note on third-person 3D Metroid. Yoshio Sakamoto is a tenacious person. He stuck with his vision for Metroid Dread for years, and even shepherded back to life the Famicom detective games. By the way, if anyone has worries about Sakamoto's ability to tell a narrative-driven game, I completely recommend the Famicom Detective Club game, The Girl Who Stands Behind, which has a brilliant, chilling twist, and is generally a well-told, spooky story if you like games of that nature. I suspect the lesson that Metroid Dread took from Other M was to keep the character of Samus as pretty much a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and not try to fill her in too much, but equally to exploit and develop her rogues gallery and powers in an interesting way. Of course, the character of Adam gave Metroid Dread that brilliant twist near the end, so, nothing is wasted. Having said that, Other M may not have been quite the passion project that Metroid Dread was for Sakamoto. Coming 3 years after Metroid Prime 3, it may have come from a sense at Nintendo that a 3D Metroid would fare better than a 2D game. Ironic perhaps the same year that Donkey Kong Country returned in glorious 2D, but I think even then 2D games were not rated as highly in general, and a niche but still prestige project like Metroid was probably thought to require full 3D to justify its positioning as a big holiday game. Certainly Nintendo is in a different situation now than it was back in 2010, with a fully staffed Retro laser focused on the Metroid franchise. If Metroid Prime 4 does well, I think it's unlikely that, having assembled a Metroid Prime team in Austin, Texas, they'd send them off again to a different franchise so quickly. I fully expect Metroid Prime 5 probably within the decade, and this may affect the considerations for Sakamoto's team. A third-person Metroid would certainly feel different from the Metroid Prime titles, and I think the head honchos at Nintendo have enough faith in their developers that Sakamoto would be able to explore 3D if he wanted to, but Even then, if you look back to Other M, the major reason for employing Team Ninja, and what seems to be the major drive of the game, wasn't so much the 3D mechanics, but the cinematic cutscenes. Well, Metroid Dread has shown that not only can you have cutscenes, but they can be seamlessly integrated into the gameplay engine, so you can have the camera angles contort around Samus at moments of high drama. I also think the senior management at Nintendo have developed perhaps a stronger idea of the strengths and weaknesses of Mr. Sakamoto. In an old Iwata Asks, Satoru Iwata was astonishingly frank about Sakamoto's weaknesses as well as his strengths. Sakamoto-san seems to have a specific image of what he wants to do, but he certainly doesn't express himself clearly. That's why he's unable to communicate his image from the start so that other people understand. He does have a distinct image in his head, however, so when he's shown something that's even a little different to this image, he's very clear about saying, no, that's not right. Notably, while he was the director on Other M, since then he has stuck to the more senior but less hands-on role of producer, and while I have no doubt that he was very heavily involved supporting first-time director Fumi Hayashi on Metroid Dread, succession planning may well be on his mind. Just as Hidemaru Fujibayashi has become nearly as important a figure to Zelda as Eiji Aonuma himself, having now directed the Oracles games, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it's possible to imagine Hayashi or others stepping up more and signaling a change. Another significant figure in the development of the Metroid games has been Takehiko Hosokawa, the co-director of Other M and the director of Samus Returns, but the fact that he was less hands-on with Dread suggests that he may also be stepping back as part of a changing of the guard. None of this necessarily gives us clarity on whether a 2D or 3D option would be preferable, except perhaps that the more junior producers are more likely to be inspired by the earlier forms of the games, and also perhaps more responsive to direction from senior management, at least during the relatively early portions of their career. Would Nintendo want a 2D game that could win awards like Metroid Dread, or roll the dice on a 3D title when they already have the Prime series? And would developers who grew up obsessed with Super Metroid feel the need to march Samus off in a bold new direction just yet? Before we assess this likelihood, are there any other options besides a 2D and a third-person 3D game for Mercury Steam to be working on? Potentially. I could see Nintendo trying to spin Metroid off and develop a more multiplayer-focused experience. They tried it before with Federation Force, and Nintendo is nothing if not determined. Also, with Mercury Steam having developed both Metroid and Castlevania, and Nintendo having collaborated well with Capcom before, I can even imagine them doing a crossover of the two, creating an actual game called Metroidvania. But after the absolute hype bomb detonates and the laughter dies down, I just can't see that game being something that would anywhere near be as compelling to people as sequels in the Metroid or Castlevania franchises. It's a lovely idea, but I just don't see it happening. Ultimately, if a new Metroid is announced from Mercury Steam, I'm going to forecast a new 2D game as a high chance, 70% likelihood, with a new 3D Metroid being a low but not impossible chance, more like 30%. So, the likelihood is that Mercury Steam are working on a new 2D Metroid. However, the possibilities of what that could entail, the new mechanics opened up by particularly the end of Metroid Dread and the storytelling potential in the universe, is still open to a lot of discussion. Whack the subscribe button to see more forecasts in future on this topic, leave a comment to let me know your thoughts on where everyone's favourite bounty hunter should go next, and check out this forecast on the screen just for you. Thank you so much for watching, and see you again soon.